Hey guys, welcome to the LT Brings the Heat podcast. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler, where we talk about baseball and sports performance. With topics ranging from coaching, business, and player development, our goal is to bring you a no BS approach to development in baseball and sports performance. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's rock and roll. All right, hey guys, back with you for another episode today. It's Sean Laird and Adam Heisler. LT Brings the Heat, and this is, I believe, going to be episode 4. So I got a special guest today, one of my former players and former, actually, part of the LT squad as well, Jeff Scott. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Jeff.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. This is awesome that you guys are doing this during all the time with no baseball and whatnot, but I'm Jeff Scott. I played for Sean when I was 16, I believe, on the Indiana Bulls. Seems like a while ago, but it wasn't that long ago. I played with the Bulls from 12 to 18 and then ended up going to Coastal Carolina out of high school, transferred to a junior college, and then finished up my playing career at Bowling Green State in Bowling Green, Ohio. And currently am a graduate assistant getting my MBA in coaching at the University of Northwestern Ohio in Lima, Ohio.
Awesome stuff. And that's really cool. Just kind of see the process and see kind of like your trail in the game of baseball. Everybody's got their own story, and it's pretty cool. You've had the advantage of being able to play for a bunch of coaches and kind of see everything from a lot of different perspectives, which I think is really important in the game. One thing I kind of want to dive into is you were a 3-sport athlete in high school. You were quarterback for a football team, wrestler, and obviously was a top D1 type catcher. Kind of dive into us a little bit the athleticism that it took to play those 3 sports and how that kind of helped you transition to college.
For the most part, I think it was more of the fact that I was doing different sports, like different activities that helped me increase stuff for baseball or for my mobility, stuff like that. So wrestling was more of like flexibility and understanding what my body's doing for moving my body for blocking or anything like that. And then football was more of like the endurance sport of being able to run, be able to stay in shape, stuff like that, in the sense of running down the bases, run bases, stuff like that. So, it all kind of coincided with itself and making me a better athlete, not only on baseball field, but in general.
That makes a ton of sense. And Jeff, you mentioned you were a quarterback?
Yeah, for my junior year.
Okay, so that's pretty cool because I think from a catching standpoint, it's kind of like the quarterback of the baseball team. So can you kind of relate to how those two coincide of where when you are the catcher, you're kind of in charge of the whole squad, just like you are as a quarterback calling the right plays?
Right. So I guess one of the things for me that was difficult was being in the huddle and calling out plays or something like that, and being able to go through that process of having to learn how to make sure that you're calling the right stuff. Like one word could throw off a play or something like that, and being able to be loud and concise and make sure that everyone can hear you. Depends on if it's raining, loud noises, loud crowd, whatever. And then going into catching is like, because I use that as well for all the catchers I've ever worked with, is being loud, making sure everyone can hear you. And it's on a bigger scale because you're not just talking to 11 guys right next to you. You're talking to 8 other guys hundreds of feet away from you. So it's something that really did help. Just being able to speak clear and concise, get everything out that you need to get out, and then kind of go from there.
That's awesome correlation right there. Kind of my next question I want to dive into is, obviously you trained at LT for, over the course of a lot of years. And that last year you put on like 15 to 20 pounds of muscle for your senior year of college. Phenomenal shape, exit velocity and strength. Everything looked phenomenal. But also part of that process years before you kind of were diagnosed with diabetes. And I believe, was it your junior year or your senior year?
It was the winter break of my senior year. So New Year's Eve of my senior year. Gotcha.
And so, kind of help us. And I know a lot of guys struggle and not understanding to eat enough to gain muscle. They make excuses, say, I eat all the time, I'm eating. And what they're really doing is they're really just eating a big dinner and they're only consuming 3 meals a day. Kind of explain to us, like, how eating the right way, getting as much food as you can as possible in, and maybe the struggles that you have with diabetes and things that you had to conquer with that kind of helped you develop you into the athlete you became?
First, based off of, I guess, the diabetes portion of it, like you said, I mean, it was winter break my senior year, so I had about 5 or 6 months before I was shipped off to Coastal. And that 5 or 6 months was a really big trial and error of, I need to get this under control or it's going to be a long road after this and further down the future and stuff like that. Like, there's so many complications with it and whatnot that can happen. And actually going to Coastal after that 5 or 6 months was something that really opened up everything for me and actually made me want to understand what was going on. I was able to talk with a nutritionist. They kind of set out a plan for me. We had our dining halls and stuff there that they basically could go through and tell me what I needed to eat, what I needed to look for in the food that they were serving. And I guess one of the things that kind of surprised me was, like, it's not the stuff that you would think would be bad for you. Like, we had a pizza buffet in our dining hall. And I'm not saying that every day I wasn't over there getting at least like 2 slices of pizza, but it was because I was working out and all that good stuff as well. I mean, the 2-hour lifts in the mornings at 6 a.m. and then walking to class. I mean, you're burning calories all day, every day. So, I mean, it was more right for me to eat like that. And then basically going through that last year, I was working 40 hours a weekend too, down at Bullpen. Mm-hmm. So I was preparing meals for the whole weekend. Hard-boiled eggs, like 2 dozen eggs for a weekend. I would take protein powder with me. I would basically pack a lunch for a small army and be able to eat on those days. I wasn't really lifting, but I was walking around, and I was walking like 18, 20 miles a day around baseball fields. So it's just being able to understand kind of what it is to fuel your body. You don't want to put in bad fuel, but every once in a while I feel like that's something that people do, just to kind of change up stuff. Like right now, while I'm coaching here, it's a lot of red meat and chicken and rice, just because, one, I'm balling on a budget for the most part, but I mean, that's the coaching lifestyle. But I mean, it's good stuff, and then every once in a while you give yourself a little bit of a treat, I guess. But with the diabetes portion of it, I guess it's I understood after, like I said, that first semester or so of college, that it really wasn't what I was putting into my body that was affecting it. It was what I was doing on the outside, working out, 4-hour practices, sitting in study tables, getting stressed out about finals. That more had a effect on what I was doing than the food that I was eating and how much I was eating. So
that's awesome right there. It's sorry, what'd you say?
I said it was pretty impressive of like the stuff that they were putting in to that work, like basically like a worksheet for me to go through of what I needed to eat through a day and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely.
When you got the diabetes kind of under control, did you notice like an improvement in your athletic performance, both in the strength and conditioning side as well as baseball side? I think it would be big for some listeners maybe that their athletes have diabetes, or maybe the parents of athletes with diabetes. Can you kind of explain, just once you got it under control, did your game kind of go up at another level?
That was another thing. Like, I mean, the control was something that I struggled with, like I said, that first couple of months of being in college, just because I was put on a pretty heavy load of what I was eating and stuff like that. I was on a 700 carb a day diet, and being diabetic, I mean, that's running through insulin like crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once I was able to figure that out and be able to work out when I was eating that meal, or if I'd eat before workout, it would kind of bring me back down, stuff like that. And I got my levels to where they somewhat needed to be. I really did notice something was changing. And it was more of like that physical strength. I didn't feel like, I guess, with a low blood sugar or high blood sugar, you feel tired, you feel kind of worn out, because that energy is either being used too fast or it's not being used to get rid of it. So you're just more lackadaisical, stuff like that. And once I could get it in that range of where it was more consistent, I mean, I never really had that fatigue or anything like that. So it's I want to say that I never had it, but it kind of went away for the most part. And it was easier for me to get through that 4-hour practice or a lift and then some conditioning or something like that.
And that's a great example. And that's something for the listeners, you know, the guys that are listening right now, like, had the adversity of being diagnosed with diabetes 5-6 months before going to one of the top 25 Division I programs in the country, had to figure out what he needed to do to eat. As he went on throughout his career and in his last year, you know, senior year, he's working 40. And I know from being with Jeff, it was sometimes 50, 60 hours a week too.
Yeah.
And he's training at a high level, and it's about 100 degrees in my gym when we're training in the summertime. So he understood, like, hey, I've got to consume fuel. I've got to take care of my body. And he gained that 15 to 20 pounds with that heat, with working that time. So that right there, guys that are listening, there's no excuse for you not to find time to basically get involved with your nutrition, understanding you got to eat those 6 meals a day. And, you know, a guy without a plan is a plan to fail. And Jeff right there showed how he could be successful by designating and setting that plan. That right there is just awesome stuff. And so guys that don't have the adversity like that Jeff had, there's no excuse for getting that fuel in every day. So I kind of want to segue into the part that we really want to dive into. And me and Adam were talking about this. And when it comes to baseball development and it comes to specific positional development, the catching position is so overlooked. And there's the biggest reason it's overlooked is because the majority of guys don't play that position. It's a fine position. It's a high level position. A lot of guys, like, it's one position on the field. You know, there's 3 positions, the outfield, you know, there's multiple infield positions. The big thing is like, from a Bulls coach, there's a lot of things that I see guys struggle with. And I kind of want to dive into this as deep as we can today for the listeners to kind of help, you know, the catching development. And I'm going to kind of run through some things that I see guys that struggle with constantly. Like, I'm coaching year to year with the Bulls. I've coached the 16 to 17-year-old age levels. You know, we'll have, you know, 60 to 70, 80% of those guys go play D1 ball. And every now and then we'll have our Jeff Scotts that, you know, do a lot of things the right way and bust his ass and do things hard. But some of the common mistakes, I see guys that don't communicate at all. I see guys that really struggle on communicating, whether it's coming from fly balls, you know, relays, you know, talking to their pitchers. When it comes to calling pitches, and me and Adam, we kind of touched on some of the stuff with Dan and didn't get into detail about it. Dan held the recruiting coordinator at IU. But a lot of guys have no idea how to call pitches. They're basically robots at their high schools. You know, framing pitches is a struggle. The guys don't understand. They'll give up on pitches that might be right there in the zone a little bit, or maybe a little out of the zone. They give up, and it kind of hurts us in the long run. You know, give it up on 3-4 pitches a game that could be strikes. Stabbing at fastballs low in the zone. That's something that I don't have any hair anymore, but I'd be pulling it out if I saw guys stabbing more pitches at the bottom of the zone. And also reading situations, which kind of dives into that first part, is, you know, understanding confidence. Like, some guys will be in a stressful situation, and I don't want to go out there and last thing a pitcher wants to do is have their coach come out there a lot of times, right? So a lot of that is they want to rely on that catcher to be a leader. Like, hey, come on, bro. Like, we got this, man. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to take care of me. We're going to do this. And those are kind of the top things I see. And I kind of want you to kind of dive in. You could talk on that stuff, but I kind of want you to dive in and really kind of give an idea of the biggest things that you see guys struggle with at the high school level, but also in the transition to college.
Yeah. So I guess one of the biggest things that you were talking about was that communication, mental side of the game. I mean, you know for a fact that I've talked to you multiple times about mental situations, stuff like that. Just understanding what it is, what it takes between the ears to be an elite athlete or be like the best that I can be. And what you said with that communication, stuff like that, is being able to basically like take control. And like Adam said, was the quarterback, and you got to be able to call out stuff while it's happening, before it happens. I mean, being able to play a couple scenarios ahead, just being able to basically with like pop-ups, stuff like that, being able to say who's got it. I mean, I know that they're calling it out too, but that's one of the things that we work on here is just being able to yell out the last name of the guy that's underneath the ball. It just helps out so much more than just them two yelling back at each other, I got it, or something like that. Being able to read if we got a guy on first and there's a ball hit down the right field line and into the corner, that guy's probably scoring, so we're not going to worry about the guy on first, we're probably coming home because there's no way for anything else to be a play. That's our play that we're trying to stop him anyway. So, I mean, there's stuff that just needs to go into just pre-setting everything, knowing the situations, knowing what's going on before it even happens. And I know, like, that's a lot of positional player coaches, like, go-to is know what's going to happen before the ball's hit to me. Well, with a catcher, that ball's coming at you every time. You don't have a choice of whether or not that ball's coming to you. So it's double for catchers of whatever, thinking ahead, stuff like that. Another thing is more of the hand-eye coordination stuff. This helps with your guys that push balls out of the zone. Just being able to read a pitch, trajectory, downward angle. It's almost like base running and being able to see downward angle to steal base. You just got to be able to react. Stuff like that is more of I don't know how you'd say it, a skill that you can basically train and try to get to people to understand. So like with the hand-eye coordination stuff, a lot of like catchers, I'll bounce balls off the wall while they're facing the wall, but I'm behind them. So they have to react and be able to see where everything's going and not push balls out of the zone. That's the drill that I did as well in college. That really helped me start to understand I need to be able to pick up the ball coming at me before it's really coming at me. Understanding each pitcher, that's a big thing that I feel like not a lot of catchers do. A lot of catchers don't get the chance to catch every pitcher or stuff like that. Especially like around here, we had 2 catchers for bullpens, so we had to bring up a couple of our JV guys to catch pins, and our varsity guys weren't catching every one of our varsity pitchers. And I feel like that's something that needs to be done so that we understand, even if it's for an inning or an out or something, we need to know everything about that pitcher. And one of the things I did at Bowling Green and one of our volunteers did was put together a booklet of a page for each pitcher. And basically after each bullpen that you caught, you'd write down, well, he does this adjustment for a slider. He needs to think shoulder instead of thinking outside the shoulder. Sliders is that strikeout pitch. Changeup's good, behind in counts, stuff like that. Just so you have an idea and be able to look through and understand your pitcher and how they work. And then grip strength, I'm sure this is going to be a good one for you, Sean, just because of the fact of bigger forearms, bigger grip strength, stronger wrists. I mean, that is one of the things that helps not push that ball out of the zone. You're basically just physically moving that ball the direction you want it to go. Just being strong enough to be able to take the force of 90 plus or whatever you're catching, or a slider that's moving 2 feet, and be able to stick it. And that's more of the fact of where you hear coaches say stick it, or being able to present a pitch, is working on that flexion and staying strong instead of extending that arm. So one of the things that I've learned from wrestling was my coaches always told me extension's a loss of power. So the more you got extended, the less you had to do anything, basically. So with catchers, I don't want them fully extending that arm just because of the fact that you don't have anything to embrace that ball coming in, and it really pulls or it really pushes you out of the zone. So you're really trying to stay flexed and be able to let that ball come to you, but still being strong enough to really hold it wherever it's crossing the plate or bringing it back to the zone or something like that. And then my last one's mobility. I mean, I've seen a lot of catchers that have come in. We had a couple this year that were freshmen on our JV team that were really mobile, but I see a lot of kids when I look at videos and stuff like that I think they're mobile, and they see the Gary Sanchez's and they see the JT Realmutos that are sitting on one knee. Well, that's mobile, but it's not mobile at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's comfortable. And that's one of the things I really worked with one of my catchers for the JV or with the varsity guys. He has had knee problems, and just really working on stretching, being able to sit comfortably in a stance, and then being able to move laterally and for throwdowns and stuff like that. Like, he has come back head and shoulders from the fall, and then when we started in the spring, of being able to really sit comfortably and not have any discomfort when he was sitting, or even if he were to go down to that one knee, he was still feeling fine with being able to sit low and still present a low target in that aspect. But those are my biggest things that usually I talk with our guys a lot about, just being able to think ahead of the game, work on our hand-eye coordination, work on being able to beat the ball to the spot, understanding every one of our pitchers, grip strength, really working on being strong in that wrist and that forearm, and then mobility and being able to be comfortable and sit in a position that's easy for us to move.
Basically getting into a powerful position and being able to stay in that position. Those are some awesome knowledge bombs right there. Especially when you're talking about the reach and the adjustments you can make and the bouncing the ball off the wall and being able to understand, receiving those pitches and recognizing spin, understanding the pitchers that you're dealing with. I think a lot of that stuff is definitely stuff that's completely overlooked, especially the grip strength portion. A lot of guys think that, hey, I'm catching bullpens, I'm in every game, I'm practicing every game. That's enough, right? And there's stuff that you got to do outside of those practices to prep and help that grip strength, to help you understand those things. Adam, is there anything else you want to jump in on, like questions you have of some of the teams that you've had in the past?
Yeah, I love how, all that information was great, but I love how you talked about basically the scouting report for each pitcher. As you're watching major league games now, when a new pitcher comes in, these coaches are bringing the wristband to the catcher, and it's basically, hey, this is what this guy's strengths are, weaknesses, and it's just so cool to see where the game's kind of transition to. And one big thing that stuck out to me is it's a lot of defensive talk, which is awesome because the best catchers I've been around, I'll tell them, if you're saving runs on the defensive side, just what you bring to the table offensively is a bonus. As long as you're taking care of our pitchers, you're getting calls, you're not giving up runs. And what I mean by that is don't throw the ball into center field, or if you field a bunt, don't throw it down the first baseline. Do whatever you can to prevent runs if you're making a tag at home. And can you just kind of talk about how I think almost more than any position on the field, catcher, you can get away with, maybe you don't have the best stick in the world, but if you're really good behind the plate, you're going to play a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, just based on that, I will say for myself, I mean, that was one of the reasons that I caught so much throughout my career. I mean, I was more of a defensive guy anyway. The bat was there every once in a while, but I couldn't be relied on it all the time. So that's what kept me in games, especially in my junior college. I mean, I was catching Thursday 9-inning games and then doubleheader on Saturday for our conference. It was because I had that relationship with my pitchers, and I was trying to keep as many runs off the board as possible just by stealing strikes, make sure the ball stays in front of me, all accurate throws to wherever I'm throwing to, and basically making sure that everyone is getting the ball where it needs to be to stop guys. Like I said, the bat wasn't there every day, and I can admit that because, I mean, you can go back and look at stats or whatever, but it's something that wasn't there. But I will say that my defensive portion of it was more of what I took pride in, and it made me feel like a better baseball player just because I was doing something for the entire team, even though something else wasn't going right or something like that.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned accurate throws. I think a lot of kids get caught up into what their pop time is, and it's hey, how strong my arm is. And if you give you an accurate throw 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a way better chance than I have a bazooka, but it's only like 3 out of 10 the whole time. So
Yeah.
I love how you just now got to the throwing standpoint, because I think a lot of people look at catching and it's just all about what's his pop time, as opposed to is he mobile? Can he sit in a squat in his heels? Can he block? Can he frame? I feel like the throwing's just the last piece of the puzzle almost.
Right. The throwing's almost extra. I mean, like I said, with the 2 guys that we had here for the varsity team, one had an absolute cannon that threw 84 to 86 from behind the plate, definitely sub-2 pop time. Other kid wasn't as gifted with a right arm, stayed around the 2 area. But both of them, I explained it to them when I got here in the fall, is we're going to receive and we're going to block. I don't care if how many guys you throw out. Those are the 2 things that are most important. And when we get to throwing, we'll get to throwing. That's something that I don't think, like you said, I don't think a lot of people understand about that position, is that it's not all about the arm and it's not all about throwing guys out. That's the best part of it, maybe, but it's not the most important. And, I mean, if you watch an MLB game today, you would see that. A lot of guys don't steal as much anymore anyway, but when they do, they're accurate. They get it to the bag, and it's pretty close play. But you see a lot more of catchers being able to steal strikes and block, and that's basically what we're there to do too. So
nice.
Awesome. So I kind of want to jump into that a little bit. So say I know you do lessons on the side and you're training guys. You get a first lesson with a catcher. And one thing is there's a lot of instructors out there, the quality instructors versus, the kind of the fake instructors, the ones that are just there to get some money. Obviously, as me and Adam run businesses and you've been through the process, you've been around a lot of guys, there's very, very quality instructors like yourself and like Adam. And there's other guys that are just trying to make a buck here and there. If you're going into a lesson and, I say I'm a catcher and I want to find an elite catching instructor, what are some things that they need to look in that first lesson and with that instructor? And kind of walk us through that process of that first lesson with guys.
I mean, for the first lesson for catchers, for me was more of like just actually sitting there and being able to talk about stuff. It's not even so much of the physical proportion of it, of maybe just being able to see their primary, secondary stances. So primary, just being able to see what they're at, where they're comfortable with nobody on, and then working with somebody on their actual stance that they're going to be able to move a little bit better. Just kind of see where they're at in that aspect of it, and base everything else is basically based off of that. Because if he has a not as well formed and good stance in that secondary, you can't really work on that blocking technique until you really get into that. So it's basically a chain reaction of being able to see, well, if he's set up really high, maybe his blocking's a little loud and that's why he's kind of falling forward, or not as sitting back and being able to be balanced and stuff in his block. So, or with his receiving in his primary, maybe he's not stealing, or maybe he's not as strong because he's turned a little bit because he's seen someone on TV that sits sideways when they're catching or something like that. There's so much more that goes into that primary and secondary stance that can affect everything after that. So really just talking about that really base primary stance of where they're comfortable at, and then being able to get them in a nice athletic position for that secondary. That might take that first lesson. I don't know. I've never had one take that full time of a first lesson, but just being able to get them to understand, like, this is where we need to be and we need to get stronger so we can sit here for a long amount of time. And then you'd be able to work off of that into receiving drills in the primary and secondary. And then I usually do a lot of dry blocking, 3-ball drills, reaction drills of nothing coming at you, and a lot of tennis ball drills without chest protector. That's something that we started doing a lot at Coastal, was a lot of blocking without a chest protector and using tennis balls, stuff like that. Obviously still mask and shin guards, but being able to feel a ball actually hit you was one of the things that really pushed me into more blocking and feeling like I needed to be softer or something like that. So being able to actually work off of that stuff and then go be able to work once you kind of figure out what their weaknesses and their strengths are, you can work more like 75% of your weaknesses so that you're actually trying to get better on those. And then maybe towards the end of the lesson, you actually work on their strength to make sure those are staying maintained or somewhat getting better as well.
Yeah, that's a big key for me is, you got to have a strong base and able to get to the advanced stuff. And a lot of guys want to skip, like you're talking about, just being able to get into a good position first. That has such a big impact on being able to move left, move right, receiving. And a lot of guys, and the same thing with hitting, like guys want to get into as much detail as possible, but it's like, hey man, we've got to work on your stance. Are you distributing your weight properly? Are you moving and getting into separation properly? And with catching, I'm sure it is an absolute headache that, they see something on TV and the next thing you know, next week, you're trying to fix that they're trying to adjust and get on TV. That's something that Kobe Bryant would talk about this all the time. And he would talk about the reason I'm Kobe Bryant, the reason I'm as good as I do is because I do the basics better than anyone. And
right.
I think that's something that is 100% overlooked, and being able to do that. John Wooden, the famous basketball coach for UCLA, used to say the same thing. Like, being able to master the basics allows you to master those advanced positions, those advanced drills, and being able to get in those stressful situations where you can do those basics. You don't have to think about it. It's unconscious. It happens naturally. Yeah. Anything you want to dive in extra with that, Adam?
Yeah, just kind of as we wrap it up here at the end, what's one or two things that maybe a catcher can do during this quarantine time to kind of help improve the game if it's just sitting in the squat playing video games or whatever it is?
Mm-hmm. And that's literally one of the things I was going to say. So I used to, for wrestling, was more just for like hip mobility and stuff like that and being able to stretch, was when I was watching TV. I would sit in almost like a blocking position and sit back on my heels so that I could feel a stretch, and I'd be able to sit there and watch TV or play video games or whatever. And then one of the things that they could do as well is sit in that secondary maybe for 30 seconds in between a game or something like that. I know a lot of people are probably playing the show and some Call of Duty that's come out and stuff like that, because I can't say that I didn't buy it either. But people between games and stuff like that, that's when you can get your work in. I mean, you get another couple minutes of being able to do something, and if you're playing video games for a couple hours, that's a couple hours worth of work. It doesn't go unnoticed, and it doesn't go as like free time or anything like that if you keep working through it. But that was one of the things, just being able to sit in a blocking or a secondary position for 30 seconds or so, feel a stretch, feel like your legs are getting a little tired, come out of it, get back in it after a couple minutes or so. Working on footwork without a ball. I mean, you draw or take a piece of tape, straight line, make sure your feet are landing on the line, stuff like that. Find a crack out on the sidewalk, you can get outside. And then bouncing the ball off the wall and catching the ball and working on transfers and that as well. And then I usually do like you can sit on both knees, or you can sit in your primary or secondary and bounce ball off the wall. And once you get good at just bouncing one ball, you can add in two balls and start going a little bit quicker. Just pick up that hand-eye coordination and being able to receive and feel that ball get into your hand. And I do all this with like tennis balls, just because of the fact that, one, they're hard to catch in general, and then being able to really react and feel soft hands and stuff like that. So it kind of all works into itself.
That's awesome stuff right there, man. And I like tennis ball is such an advantage, stuff that we use for the Bulls obviously too, and I've seen you use a lot. To kind of close out here, what's the biggest advice that you have for guys that are at that high school level and they want to become a D1 catcher or a college catcher at that next level? Best advice you could give them right now to help expedite their process, which obviously we know nothing's fast in getting to that level, but what's the best advice you have for those guys?
I'd say the biggest thing is working on that mental side of the game and the communication, just being able to understand situations. Everything else is going to be kind of worked on, I guess, as the catching position throughout college. If you do go to a bigger school and stuff like that, they'll be able to help you. But that mental side was something that kind of had to be brought out of me my freshman year. And if I could go back and redo it, I think that mental side would have helped a lot if I understood it a little bit more going into it. Because the physical attributes and everything, they're going to work on. They're going to put weight on you. They're going to take weight off of you if you need to. They're going to put muscle on you. They're going to do all this and that. But one of the things is just being able to really work between the ears. I think that's one of the things that is the most important that would help out a lot.
Awesome. Good stuff right there. Adam, is there anything you want to kind of dive in before we close out right here? Anything else you want to add, ask Jeff?
Yeah, personally, Jeff, who are some catchers you really like to study, and not necessarily try to get guys to emulate them, but some of the guys that you study just to learn for yourself?
One of the guys I've really kind of started watching this past year was Mitch Garver, the Twins. He was one of the bigger ones that I started actually seeing more of, like the starting glove low and working up through pitches, stuff like that. And I really just liked how he was doing it. And then one of the other ones were who was it? I think it was Realmuto when he was with the Marlins, though. I think he started kind of paving a way, just being able to see some of the stuff they worked on, and actually some of the spring training stuff he had from the Phillies. Yeah. You see him working that low glove and stuff like that, and that's one of the things that we really try to emulate, not as much as an exaggeration as he does in some of his drills, but the biggest video that I've seen over the last couple weeks from this past spring training, for as long as it went, was him doing a drill, and then the guy behind him is literally emulating him as he's going. I think it's more of just a respect level of him seeing a guy that's catching a lot in the bigs right now, and being able to kind of base off of what he's doing and trying to really understand what he's doing. So those two guys have been really big for me. I've been starting to watch them and stuff like that. And if Dan Held watches this eventually, I remember when I was 13 years old and started catching, and he told me not to emulate Yadier Molina. He's the only one that can do it.
Yep.
So I can tell a lot of people that. And that's because of what he told me when I was 13 years old, starting to catch. He's like, I understand the Cardinals are your favorite team, but don't watch anything that he does because he does it all wrong.
Yeah.
But he does it right, too. So I think that's where some kids get in trouble, of being able to try to emulate what they're doing, but they're the only ones that can do it. So
That's awesome right there. Yeah. When I was taught boxing growing up, the big thing is my dad would always say, hey, these guys can get away with it because they can knock out a horse if they want to. So you got to be smart and understand what you're doing, and be clean with everything. So
right.
that's awesome stuff right there. And I know and Dan kind of talked about this a little bit, but I would love you coming in and diving in deep with a lot of this stuff, especially during this is a great opportunity for guys to be learning during the quarantine, and hearing a guy like you that's been through the process as a player, and also now as a coach, and is developing the future ball players. That's a big thing for me to kind of understand. We live, learn, and pass on for a reason, and we're constantly learning as coaches. And for you to kind of drop this knowledge, I learned stuff here today. I've been coaching for a long time. I know Adam learned stuff here today. And we just to kind of close out, man, we just want to appreciate you for coming on, and thanks for coming here and dropping those knowledge bombs for guys, and kind of helping us with this process. And the big thing is with you is we might have you on again in the future. We'll probably talk for another hour about something completely different. And that's the thing is we're always growing in the game. We're always learning the game. Adam, anything else you want to say before we close out?
Yeah, Jeff, thanks for coming on. That was a lot of good knowledge that you dropped today. And like Sean said, we both learned some stuff. You on Twitter? You on Instagram or anything so people can give you a follow?
Yeah, I actually run our catching Instagram at UNOH. Let me look it up real quick. I believe it's UNOH backstops. It might be something different. UNOH_catchers. That's our catching page. I haven't posted in a while, obviously, just because of the fact that we haven't been together. And then my Twitter is Jeffrey_137. I don't tweet out a whole lot, but I'll retweet a lot of baseball stuff. So
awesome stuff.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
guys. guys that are listening, man, make sure you guys give them a follow. And until next time, guys, we'll see you guys later.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
All right, guys, we're going to kind of summarize having Jeff on right here. A lot of good stuff. One thing that I really, really enjoyed in the beginning of this is how he talked about, eating right and making sure he's planning his meals. The guy had a lot of adversity with the diabetes and had to understand nutrition at a younger age than most people do. For me, the guys that are listening, being able to understand, like, you can put on that muscle mass, you can eat those eggs, prepare those eggs beforehand. That was really good stuff that I hope guys that are listening to this really take away from that first part of this interview.
Yeah, that was the first time I've ever really got to sit down with a baseball player that was diabetic. I don't think I've ever either played with one or not one that stands off the top. So I think he's kind of a great kind of mentor to maybe if the kid does have diabetes that, hey, you might have to change up your eating a little bit, but there is a game plan they can put together to kind of help you understand all the sugar intake and everything that you're supposed to do with it. Another cool thing, man, was just him diving into catching. You can tell he's passionate about it. He's got a lot of knowledge about it. But it's funny because back-to-back times we've had guys come on and talk about catching, and one of the first things they mention is mobility. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough. It's just being able to sit into a squat in your heels comfortably. And with you being really big into the strength and mobility sides, I'm sure you talk about all your guys. This is just as important as it is on the baseball field. And that's just something that really stood out to me, and just how eager he is to continue to learn and to get information out there.
Yeah. That's a common theme, like with the catching guys, obviously with two guys already, is, the mobility aspect. And that's something that I literally have to fight kids about all the time. It's something that guys are like, whatever, and if you have a good strength and conditioning program, you have a strength and conditioning program that's actually helping you with your mobility and actually going to build your mobility. Like, we make it mandatory. We'll have pre-warm-up stuff and we'll have stuff at the end that we have to do. But, don't be that guy. Like, take it from a guy that had a ton of injuries myself. Like, I didn't focus on the mobility like I should have, and I got hurt from it. And if you're a catcher in that position, or you're wanting to become an elite catcher in that position, you're playing every day. You're getting beat up more than other guys in the game. With all the injuries I had, playing infield and then outfield in college, I can't imagine being behind the plate and the amount of work that you had to do outside the game to take care of yourself. And another thing I kind of want to dive into is like tennis ball. We talked about the guys with lesser means in the first episode that play at a high level. You can get a tennis ball and become a better and elite catcher right there, and working on little things right there. What was the biggest thing that kind of stood out for you when he talked about those drills?
Yeah, I love how the last thing he mentioned was the arm, because me and you both know, being around baseball and for all of our life, and having either a parent or coach come up and, hey, I have this catcher, he's a 1.8 pop time, and that's the first thing they throw out, as opposed to he's a really good catcher, he knows how to call a game, he blocks, he's accurate in his throws, he receives well. And it was just cool to hear it from a guy he was a catcher at a D1 level, as well as now he's a catching coach and catching instructor of what he actually looks for in catchers, as opposed to you go to these websites, the first thing you look under a catcher thing is here's his pop time and here's his velo. And that doesn't explain anything about how well of a catcher he is. So that was one thing that stood out to me. What was another thing that kind of stood out to you?
Oh, man, I'll tell you one thing is when it comes to the leadership and understanding the situation, and that's something like you got to understand 2-3 steps ahead in the game as a catcher. And the one thing that I didn't even mention, and I kind of want to capitalize on right here is, once you go through the lineup as a catcher and knowing how you got those guys out, that's kind of what he was segueing and understanding as a catcher. Is like, you got to read the game, understand the game. Like if the 3-4-5 hitter struggles with curveballs away or certain pitches in the zone, you got to remember that next time around, especially when you transition to a different pitcher in the 5th or 6th inning. It's late in the game, and that those innings and those runs are the game. That's most important. And understanding, like, as a catcher, you can't just casually go through the game. Understand how you got this guy out. Understand how you got that guy out. Understand where that ball went. Be able to communicate, hey, to you last time. You got to understand that stuff. And that was kind of what he was diving into. And I knew exactly that's what he meant. So as listeners, hopefully you guys understand that. It's like you have to understand what he means and understand what guys do and how to get those guys out. And, there's going to be pitchers that might be a little, stubborn in situations like that, but you got a guy out a certain pitch, you got to be able to follow through with it next at bat.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, just the game behind the game. A lot of the times people just talk about the physical athleticism as opposed to mentally smart and learning how to – I mean, I think every great team out there has a great catcher. There's not going to be a great team that doesn't have a good catcher. I promise you that. And it just shows that's probably the most important position on the field, in my opinion, because they're involved in every single pitch. And what they bring to the table offensively literally is just a bonus. I mean, you look at the stats of major league hitters that are catchers these days, they're lucky to hit over 280, over 300. You don't just see it a lot. But one thing you're seeing now more than ever is, hey, he's the best strike framer in the whole league. And that's what's keeping him in the big leagues. Example, Tyler Flowers, I was with him in the White Sox organization, and it was him learning the sitting on a knee that worked best for him to keep as quiet as possible on those pitches. And he's with the Atlanta Braves now, and he's made a career out of it because he's a really good defensive catcher. And it's so awesome to hear just from somebody that's actually bitten behind there, because that's one position I never wanted to play growing up. I promise you that.
Yeah, this is great stuff, guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I know I enjoyed it as a guy that I coached and trained, and I was around this guy all the time as he was growing up in the game, and I learned a lot of information right here. So there's never a time to stop learning in this game. Anything you want to close out with, Adam?
No, that's just so cool. You can see the relationship that you two guys had, and he's a hard worker, and I can get that just from talking with him today. And the more we can bring guests on here that are hard workers, that are honest, that put good information out there, like we just got a really good guest that's found up, and I'm excited to keep learning, as you mentioned, from these different type of people from different locations, different positions. We're just having a lot of fun with this.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure you guys, one thing I want to mention is make sure you guys leave that 5-star review. If you're enjoying what we're doing right here, you're enjoying what we're doing, the process, Adam's going to give a great perspective from the South. I'm going to give great perspective from the Midwest. And like you said, like the interview, we might be covering the same topic over the course of 2-3 weeks, and guys are going to have different perspectives on this. So if you enjoy what we do, please give us that 5-star review. That helps us kind of get the word out and understand, people go, hey, what is this? Let's see what this is all about. So until next time, guys, we'll see you guys later.
Take care.